Welcome to Studio Burgundy's Jams with series, and today we are jamming with Dave Owens. Thanks for coming in, Dave.
Thank you, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been an awesome little session we've had. We've got through 4 tracks, three originals.
Yeah.
And, tell us a little bit about your musical journey. Where did you start?
Well, look, I learned guitar at high school. I went to a boarding school, so they also had a marching band. So I ended up playing tuba in a marching band.
Wow.
Tuba
Do you still play tuba?
Oh, goodness, no.
No?
I also learned saxophone there.
Okay.
And I also learned guitar, acoustic guitar, and used to borrow everybody's guitar there. And then when I eventually left school, Mum and Dad bought me one and bought me a bass as well. Yeah, so I bass is my first instrument, but for all those formative years, I've always had an acoustic guitar. So I kind of learnt both of the instruments along the way, sort of in parallel.
Right.
But I've generally played bass in bands through all my life.
Okay.
When I got to Melbourne in the winter of '86, I started my own band, but I wasn't playing bass. I started bringing the other guys in, and I played an electric rhythm because I was sort of beginning to write my own material. Plus, I was able to cover a lot of, the retro songs and the Californian type songs from the '70s, which was the soundtrack of my life.
Right. Yeah.
So after school, a couple of garage bands. Then I fell in with a band called Mad Gorilla.
Right.
And that was a touring band, and we were Sydney-based, and it was around the '80s pub rock scene in Sydney.
That would have been hectic.
Oh, man. And I held a day job for most of it. So, I think by the time I left the band, we'd done 940-odd gigs, in 2.5 years.
Wow.
So I took a hiatus from there. Then within about 6 months, I was in another band. This one with friends that I knew, but they were sort of pro musos. Anyway, we lasted another 2.5 years. About 6 months after that, I ended up, the day job at the time sent me to Melbourne to run a warehouse.
Okay.
So about 6 months later in Melbourne, I joined a country rock band playing bass, writing originals, of course.
Yeah.
Then left those guys, played in a few party bands that were very big on the scene. And Melbourne was a big sort of blues rock sort of town. So I really learned a lot about playing the blues and everything, mainly on bass, But sort of around the turn of the century, 99, 2000, I started to record my own songs.
Yeah.
So 4 albums later, about 2011 was when I did the 4th one. And the day job scene got a bit sort of loose and weird. So I spent a lot more time looking for sort of day work than night work, even though I still worked in bands, but I tended to lean to playing acoustic guitar from that point onwards.
Okay.
And I met a lot of the A-team in Melbourne, so I was always recording demos everywhere. And I really fell on my feet in Melbourne because being a small town or a small city, it's not too long until you start to meet all the musos one by one around the town. And, I was lucky to meet a group of them, and I used to use these guys eventually for my recordings, So we moved up here to the Gold Coast in about 2017.
Wow.
With a fixer-upper, and I've probably done a dozen or so gigs up here, mostly on bass. But in the last sort of year, Dan Devine have given me a few gigs playing my own music on acoustic guitar and that.
Yep.
So Dan Devine, who I'd like to give a shout-out to too, they've been really fantastic,
Yeah.
Very professional place and, pay on time and all that. So
that's always handy.
What a super gig. And in Broadbeach. Broadbeach doesn't have a little blues scene, really. So,
no, I've heard a lot about Dan Devine.
And there's some great other bands that go through there.
Yeah. A couple of your tracks, Life on the Road, is that a little bit of an insight into what the sort of the rock scene would have been, the pub rock scene would have been in the late 70s and early 80s?
I think you're spot on. It comes from the 80s. I wrote that when we were madly touring, and someone once said to me, "How does a guy as young as you write a song like that?"
Yeah.
But it just seemed obvious to me,
Yeah,
like these are the things. What you happen, you have bad times, you play a bit, you go around.
What goes on tour
What
stays on
goes on
tour.
tour stays on tour. So yeah, that's about those life and times. I think it would fit any band really.
Yeah.
Because it's all about living on the road.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's definitely.
So it comes from personal experience, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Lastly, one more track, if you wouldn't mind sharing. It was one of your slower tracks. It's definitely had me emotional.
That's it.
Anything can be done.
Anything can be done.
Would you like to explain what that song's about and who it's about?
Yeah, sure. Look, a shout out to Bob and Sharon's extended family. It's a song about Bob and his wife. Bob was a friend behind Mad Gorilla, which is one of the bands I played in the 80s pub rock scene in Melbourne. And Bob was one of those friends behind the scenes that would always be there to help you.
Yeah.
Lugging in, lugging out. Bob he had like one of those original movie cameras, and he shot some movies of us and used to do some interviews with us, Lee Simon style.
Yeah.
Mad Gorilla was mostly an original band. We had a horror show that we used to do, and we wrote songs for that. And Bob used to set up interviews where we dress up all the gear, and he'd interview the band as we were all dressed up, and we'd spout, what we thought about this and that. So Bob's wife died about 4 months ago, after an 18-year struggle with leukemia cancer sort of a thing.
It's terrible. Yeah.
And Bob was so devoted to her. And so when she died about 3 months ago, Pat and I went off to the funeral. And then about 3 weeks later, when we came back home, his brother called me and said, I've got some ordinary news for you, Dave. Bob's taken his life, Oh, my God. So down to the funeral and come back after it. And sort of songs about Bob, and about how he helped the band out and how we first got to become friends and sort of the nice things that he sort of left with me.
Yeah.
The sort of life lessons and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it definitely struck a chord with me. And I love just the raw emotion. It's a true song.
Oh, look, I've got to confess, it's a new song, obviously only about 3 months old, and it's only about 3 weeks ago that I stopped sort of tearing up once I'd finished the song or halfway through the song.
Yeah.
Because it's so raw and so new.
Yeah.
But the best way for a musician, or for anybody really, to get stuff out is to write it down. And being a musician, I'm able to get it down in song sort of thing.
Yeah, sure.
And it was so cathartic to do that,
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Oh, thank you for sharing the song with us. It's I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad.
Lastly, a post from Dan Devine. Is there any other places you play locally on the Gold Coast that people can see?
Look, as a bass player, I've done a lot of what they call one-night stands,
Yeah.
I've worked with Billy Kay's blues band. I've sat in with Greg Farquhar's The How Dare Yous. I've sat in with Willie Wolf, or whatever his name is. I was rehearsed up a band with Boris Burkle and the Tide. So I've been fairly active, but nothing's really stuck. I haven't just found a band to say call home, which I'd really like to do.
Yeah, sure.
But I love playing bass in bands. But at the same time, I can clearly sing and play guitar. So I'm sort of keeping that in mind and looking for opportunities there too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your solo journey with us. It's been a pleasure having you in the studio.
Oh, thanks,
and, I look forward to seeing you next time, and you could maybe lay down a few more.
Look, I heartily recommend Leon and his studio. It's such a comfortable environment, and this guy, anything's no problem. So thank you, Leon.
Thanks, Dave.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.